This is a quick video for Yancy, who had a little problem this weekend. She says that she was cutting off the splicing tails on her work and she had sharp scissors in her hand, and she has a little dog who likes to jump in her lap at the most inopportune moment. And so what happened was this. She had a warp that was cut about right there, pretty close to her weaving. She wanted to know how to fix it. I addressed one way of fixing this in part 3 of the warp and weft class, but I want to show you another way. If where the warp is cut is right down here, there might be a little bit simpler way to fix it. What I'm going to do is take a T-pin or any kind of strong pin, and I'm going to put it into the weaving, maybe a 1/2 inch down from where that warp is broken. I'm going to put the head of the weaving, of the pin, right at the edge of where that warp is. And then I'm going to patch it with another piece of warp. I want the warp that I'm patching it with to be long enough that I can wind it around that pin and go all the way around the back to a spot where I'm not going to be weaving. I can tie it onto the warping bar, or I can tie it to this long warp that's still there. So make sure you leave yourself enough warp. And basically what we're going to do, I'm going to have to adjust the tension of the front here. But I'm going to wrap this tail around just so it's secured with that pin, and that the top of it is coming out right about where that warp was in the weaving. Then actually, because this warp is coming through the heddles, I can actually do a little, I'm just going to tie these together fairly loosely so I can pull that warp through easily. That lets me know that I went through the right heddles and I'm back around, getting the warp around to the back. Okay, so let's turn the loom around. And you can see this is the end that was cut, and it's loose, and it will start to make all of the ends next to it loose, which is a problem. So we're going to have to fuss with the tension to get everything back together again. But basically, I can tie these two ends together and call it good, or if I'm pickier about the tension, I could do 2 half-hitch knots around this warping bar. So here's a little bit closer view of the back of that loom. I have 2 ends that have to be secured. Okay, and the quick and dirty way to do this is just to tie a square knot between these 2 warps that have to be connected again. I want to tie the knot fairly close to the bar because I want to be able to weave as much as I can without having a knot in the way. I can tie the square knot and tighten the warp on the front where that pin is. So a square knot is left over right, right over left. A square knot is pretty strong in the up and down direction. So once I tie that, I can turn this around and go back to where that pin is and tighten this up. Didn't quite like where that pin was. It needs to be over just a little bit. I want the head of the pin to be right where that warp is. So this is just the tricky part where you're going to have to sort of feel that warp, adjust the tension. I'm pulling here a little bit, trying to get that warp the same tension as the rest. And then once it feels pretty close, do a little figure 8 around that pin. That should hold it. This little tail I'm going to tuck to the back. And from here I can keep weaving. I'm going to weave on top of this for quite a while, a couple inches at least, to make sure that that warp is really held in. Don't take that pin out until you've woven several inches at least on top of it. Then you can take the pin out and the weaving will hold it together. Once you get this off the loom, you'll have a warp sticking out here. You'll needle it back down, and you may actually, depending on how fat your warp is, you may back out this little piece, back it down into the weaving, and then stitch that into your new weaving once it's off the loom. An alternative way to do this so that the tension is more adjustable is to take, this is the new warp that I'm adding. This is the old warp. So I'm going to do a double half hitch with the old warp around itself, and that is an adjustable knot. I go around to the left and under, and then I can grab it here and slide it up. That allows me to adjust the tension of the warps that are on this side. That feels pretty good. So then I can do the same thing with this new warp. Bring it around the warping bar. And do a double half hitch. Around once, around twice. This method is a little more complicated, knot-wise, but it gives you a little bit more control over the tension. And so that feels pretty good. So from here I can just keep weaving. And I'm going to weave right on over where that splice went in. And there I can see I've got some other weaving shedding problems happening there, but what I'll be doing is weaving right over that splice, and I want to weave, like I said, several inches on top, and the weaving will actually hold this in. Don't take that pin out till you've woven at least several more inches. You can even leave it in until you take the piece off the loom. Here's a close-up of that double half hitch that I did again. Again, the warp is, I'm doing the double half hitch around itself. This is the same warp. The hitch goes, the yarn goes out to the left and around one time. Out to the left again. So it's like a backwards capital D and around. Tighten it up. You'll have 2 loops around. This is a, think of it like a stationary pole, and then you'll pull the stationary part and the other knot will slide up.